Hi, and welcome to the next video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what I think the future of ESL is going to look like. Now, keep in mind this is based on my opinion, based on things I'm reading, contacts with people in China, Japan, and abroad, in a variety of different countries. So things may change. I could be wrong. By no means am I perfect, nor am I clairvoyant. However, these are just the things that I'm noticing now as of the making of this video, which is June 19th of 2022. Happy Father's Day to everyone, by the way. So I've got a list. Let's go through it. So one of the first things that I think is going to be changing in ESL overall, and again, English to speakers of other languages, is there's going to be a general slowdown. And this has kind of already happened now with the pandemic, where people that were abroad in other countries teaching English, once the world started slowing down, places started locking down, the economic situation became a little bit more difficult for locals in that area and abroad. There was a little bit of a good amount of expat exodus, meaning that people that were teaching English in China, Japan, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and so on and so forth, all decided to come back home to either escape the pandemic, escape the lockdowns, or just to go back home. And so that certainly slowed things down, because all of a sudden you had less of a supply of teachers. And I know that a lot of teaching went online, whether people in country or people here who were teaching, people in time zones at 12, 13, 16 hours difference. However, now that economies are starting to pick up again and things are opening up in different countries, you're certainly seeing people shifting their work habits and shifting where they work and what they do. So, and teachers generally burn out after 5 years on average, whether it's domestic, teaching in your own home country or abroad. So certainly seeing the demand go down. This doesn't mean that there aren't jobs. There are plenty of jobs. But if you think about it, a lot of those jobs are for people that they've lost. People that were part of that expat exodus that never returned, or they couldn't fill those positions, or they maybe had open positions when all of this started, and now they're finally catching up to trying to fill those seats again. So I think there's going to be that. On top of it, I feel there has been a reevaluation in the last few years, but especially now, of where does ESL fit in your country. If you are a very developed country and you have your own industries and you are a captain of any one of these particular industries, and you're doing business abroad, and you've had ESL or English language learning and teaching in your country for some period of time, chances are there's not going to be as much of demand, because you've had the exposure to the language longer. You've maybe grown up in a school or a training, or gone through a training center or whatever, where English was taught, and and maybe you do it for your business, in which case you've had that support, you've had that exposure to the language for a longer period of time, so you don't need as much of it. And the same thing is probably true to a much greater degree for the generation after you. They've probably had English language learning longer, and unless they're lazy or they've gone into careers where it's unnecessary, the need for as many teachers is not necessary, because they've got an ecosystem there that has continued and maybe become more efficient. Alternatively, some countries have probably thought that, we don't need English language learning across our nation. It doesn't need to be something that we require in testing. It doesn't need to be something that you must attain in order to get a good paying job, or even to go abroad and do business or travel. There are enough software alternatives Or you can get tour, if you're a traveler, there's a bunch of tours that you can take and you don't need to learn the local language. They take care of everything for you. Or like I was talking about with the apps, all right, your translate software is good enough, you can put it up to this, put it up to a sign that you don't understand or a menu, and it'll translate it into your own language and you're good to go. Or maybe you have a device that you speak, like I had seen in Japan, that you speak Japanese to, and it will spit out English, and in a fairly good translated version. So between all these things, I think there is going to be just, and has been, a general slowdown for English language learning abroad. Which brings me to the second point. It's something that's been true for decades, and the old timers, and I know I'm one of those, have seen it where the demand has shifted from country to country to country. So as one country has, feels the need for ESL, it gets oversaturated, and eventually it gets to a point where, okay, we don't need these many teachers, or we have enough locals that are bilingual that maybe studied abroad, or grew up learning the language from foreign experts, and now they can teach it good enough. They can bridge that gap with the next generation, because now they can do instant translation and they can speak to them in their native language and help them in ways that foreign teachers could not, because they were told don't speak the local language in the classroom, or they can't. So everything is just an immersion. Well, now, and people have told me this about South Korea, where there's a lot of South Koreans who had studied abroad come back and they became teachers, and a lot of the jobs for the expats for teaching dried up, became more competitive, or preferred to have someone who had studied abroad. So all of a sudden, a lot less need for foreigners to go there. And I think now the shift is going to smaller Asian countries, or countries that are on the rise. I've heard a lot of expats, and I'm sure you have too if you've gone on YouTube around this time, talk about Vietnam. And surely Vietnam has had ESL for a while, but it's still growing, it's still developing. So there's still a need for that. It's a lot more focused on kids, yes, but that's the hot place, or has been the hot place for the last few years. Cambodia as well has been another one where a lot of expats have gone, and they say it's very easy to find jobs, there's a big demand, cost of living is low, all the good things about doing ESL abroad, And I think over time that's going to shift to other, either more underdeveloped nations or developing nations in Asia. And I know that there's a lot of places in the Middle East that, for a variety of reasons, are looking for expats to come in and teach. Same thing with a lot of countries in Africa. They are looking for expats to go there and teach. And over time, it's going to shift. It has been shifting, and it will continue to shift. So bringing me to the next point, and this is something I've seen in my time, there's standardization of requirements. Prior to me going to China and teach, which was my first assignment, the only requirement for you to teach in China was you needed to, have a passport from an English-speaking country, have gone through 12 years of schooling there, meaning first grade through 12th. Didn't need a college degree. And needed to be, your English needed to be native speaker level. And that's it. Literally, that was it. And I know of a few people who did that, who were like, most of them went through college. I'll say that. But not all of them. And they would just go and teach, had no experience, having no formal training, just go. And many of them stayed there for many years, and I think there are a few who are still there now, who now have the experience, who, are serious teachers. Not all, but a good amount. Then when it was my turn to go, the requirement was raised. It was, and this was before I went, I should say. was you needed to have a 4-year degree from a college or university in that country, or in your home country. And on top of that, they added that you need to have a TEFL or TESOL certificate, which is teaching English as a foreign language or teaching English to speakers of other languages. And that's something I talked about in a prior video. Something I had done is I took an online course where I had to read a lot of material. There weren't as many videos available as there are now in the program that I took. I think there's only like 2 videos showing a good class and a bad class, and you had to write an essay talking about why was it good, why was it bad, and what you would have done differently. Anyhow, so it's just a lot of reading about theory, classroom management, lesson planning, all this kind of stuff, which I found very useful. And I'm going to talk about these things in a different light in a future video. Anyhow, that became the new requirement. And in some countries, they will not accept that certificate. They actually go for something which is considered the higher bar, which is a CELTA, Certificate of English Language Teaching Ability, which is offered through Cambridge Trinity, I believe, and it's a more intensive course. For the longest time, it used to be mandatory in person. There was no way you can do it online, in part or in whole. However, technology changes things. And as of today, I'm not sure if you can do the whole program online, but I know you can do a significant portion of it online. So times are changing. And in addition to that, I've noticed a lot of universities here and in other parts of the US, and I think even in other countries, offer a CELTA type program through the university, where you're getting hands-on experience, and they have a young learners component and so on. So even that is getting a run for its money. They're not the only one anymore. And so you're definitely going to see requirements going to go up and up and up and up and up and up and up. Where they stop, who knows? Like anybody who studies economics, when the requirements get up to a certain point and the supply starts dwindling, eventually they will stop raising the requirements, or they may pull them back just a hair. But they are going to go up, and they have gone up, and they most likely will go up. Next point, and related to this, more paperwork. As I mentioned in one of my prior videos about going to China the first time, there was quite a bit of paperwork I had to fill out, besides just pass my resume on, fill out an application, get a medical check signed by my doctor, scan a copy of my degrees, or my associates and my bachelor's. That's why I said degrees, and just send those out. A few years later, had to get them apostilled, had to get them certified, had to send them to the embassy so they can double check it, had to send transcripts along with that. All this extra stuff in this just a matter of a couple of years. Well, as time goes by, that's going to only increase, especially if they're asking for higher level certifications like the CELTA. Now you got to provide proof of a CELTA, and who knows, maybe they'll ask if you took a CELTA and you have a grade component to it. They might ask for the transcript showing that grade. Or if you did it through a university, all right, let's see the university's credentials. Let's see what are the classes you took, what are the grades you got on them, how many classes did you take, all that. So paperwork is going to get more, not less complex, regardless if they raise the other requirements. It's going to be no different, and I'm sure vaccination status is going to be a big one. Bringing me to my next point, the shrinking age range. Something I've talked about in a prior video about, depending on which country you're in, there's a certain period where you age out. You're too old, or the country decides if you're above a certain age, then they're not going to allow visas to be processed for teaching for a person of X age or above. And it's for a variety of reasons. Health is one of the big ones. They don't want somebody coming into the country who's going to need constant medical care and put a strain on the system. I get it. I understand it. It's logical. However, being in China, I've seen expats who are over 60 who are still teaching there until very recently. However, they told me, and I had seen it, that it was much more difficult to get a year contract, much less get any contract once they hit 60. One of the ones that I know couldn't get his contract renewed and just said, okay, I'm out. And he will not be able to go back to China unless something changes, as of this day. Same thing I've heard and read in Japan, where usually after about 40 it gets a little more difficult to find a job. I was fortunate in that when I went, that I just happened to be under 40. And I know some people who are above 40. You know, one gentleman who's in his early 50s who got a contract and was still teaching there. However, that requirement, I'm sure, is only going to get higher and higher, because they're going to want, like every employer in any industry, you're going to want someone younger, more energetic, and more willing to do the hard work for less pay. Whereas an older person has got the experience, is more efficient, in my most humble opinion and from everything I've seen, may not have as much energy, but uses the energy more efficiently than the younger person. But because of potential age-related issues or whatnot, they go, you know what, let's get a young face, because youth and energy, and maybe it's the idea of the perception. It's a young, attractive person, and this is the person who's going to be teaching you, and the students might get excited over that, or they might believe that hype. Some, not all. So I expect that is going to only decrease. It's going to shrink that age range. So if it was 60 at one point, it's probably going to be 55, then 50, then 45, maybe stop around 40. But it's going to happen. It might happen in individual countries at different times, but I feel it's an inevitability. Seen it in other places, so it stands to reason it will happen again. And the last thing, it's something I've certainly seen with prior to the pandemic, after the pandemic, or this current time, pay recalculations. Because of the increased, when the demand came back for teachers, and it's slowly coming back in different countries, they've had to recalculate how much they're paying people, because they're maybe not getting people as quickly as they want, and there's a dire need. Or maybe they were paying them too much before, and now they can't afford to pay those old rates, so they have to find some middle ground. Or maybe they've realized that we don't need English learning as much as we thought we did, and this is what the pay scale is going to be now. I know with China, pay's only increased during this time because a lot of people left, like myself. And so they're trying to keep the people that they have, because a lot did leave, and it's very difficult for them to bring people in country. Now, they've dropped the PU letter requirement, from what I understand, for certain individuals, which is going to be helpful. But after 2 years being out of country, I feel, from personal experience and talking to other expats who are in the same boat, a lot of us aren't even considering returning. And a lot of people moved on. They waited maybe a year, things didn't get better, and they're like, all right, time to transition back home or go somewhere else. So that's lost supply. And it's going to affect whatever the country's calculations are. In China, it's gone up because the supply's gone down, and that a lot of that supply doesn't want to return. And the people that I know who are there, there's a good amount of people who are leaving this year, more so than before. Or I should say, more people are leaving in larger numbers than before. For, lockdowns being one of the big things, they're just kind of tired of it. Or if they have a family, they're like, you know what, can't raise a family in this situation forever. In addition, certain countries, and I've seen this with countries in the Middle East before all this, that used to be known as very high-paying places to go for ESL, Saudi Arabia being one of them, and other parts of the Middle East. They would pay more than China. I remember hearing from people, direct word of mouth, who went there, who said they were paying me $5,000 or more a month to teach, plus giving, I would be in a compound, which has a negative connotation. It's not. It's just think of an apartment complex that's safe, that you have your own facilities, you have these nice sized apartments, everything's clean, good, and done, and they're self-contained communities. And you can still go out and about in the city, and there's no like checkpoints per se or anything weird. But it's it's an apartment place with all the modern amenities that a lot of expats are used to. And you'd have that paid on top of this pay, and sometimes have somebody drive you to and from your job. Now, I haven't looked at any videos in a while from people who are there on the ground now and have been there through this time, but I remember seeing before all this, when I was considering after leaving Japan where to go in the Middle East, started to be a consideration. Pays had shrunk. So instead of making $5,000 a month, you're maybe making 2 or 3. And when I looked at the conversion, I was like, that's the same as in China. Now, if you find the Middle East as a hardship, maybe because of the difference in culture, religion, a bunch of different things, and I won't comment on those, it's just what it is, then for a lot of people like myself, China was a good alternative because, okay, this is an interesting culture, I'd like to learn about it. It's different, but in other ways it's similar in terms of the lifestyle, in terms of the religious freedom that you get, and the things that you can tolerate. Whereas for some people, maybe the Middle East isn't, and thus what they would call the hardship pay, so it was a lot higher. Well, I guess they decided that either they've had ESL long enough so they don't need to pay these exorbitant rates, and or why are we trying to outbid China? We'll just match what they pay, and whoever wants to come comes, and whoever doesn't, oh well. So this is another good example of pay recalculation. Or 2 examples: China raising because of this current period, and the Middle East, specifically Saudi Arabia from what I recall, matching what they're paying, because why would they pay more? So in terms of other things that I think are going to happen in the future of ESL, there's a bunch of other things I can speculate on, but these are the things that I feel pretty strongly about, that I have seen examples of, that I can easily point to and people can see for themselves and then make their own decision. So this is where I think it's going, and if you are considering going into ESL in the future, keep in mind, besides whatever the requirements are for international travel and moving abroad, and what your home destination requirements are going to be, that things are changing. They're going to change faster and faster. And are these changes you're comfortable with? Is the lifestyle you're going to something you'll be comfortable with? Is this something you want to do for a short period or longer term? If longer term, what is that longer term going to look like? Have you done your research? Have you really done your research? Have you contacted people there? Have you talked to those who are doing it right now and what they've seen? Have you learned about the culture? Do you know all the requirements? Not just to get in country, but to stay in country and to be successful in your job. If you don't, you may want to consider looking into it very seriously, doing your homework, and then at the end of the day, making up your own mind. Anyway, that's all I have to say. So, Hope you guys are doing well, and see you in the next video.